We're back here on this JCN special forum on the economy of the Bahamas, and at the break we were talking about what is happening in Grand Bahama and how we can turn around the economy there. Mr. Wind, I don't know if you...
Well, I think we want to stop at Grand Bahama for a moment,
Okay.
because I think a number of very important things were said. I think Julian said some very important things in terms of what the problems that were actually created in Grand Bahama, how they kind of came about, right? But when we look at Grand Bahama in terms of, Sir Franklin mentioned the initial thrust of being an industrial capital, and that was correct. But you know, to be a real industrial player, you got to be a member of WTO. Grand Bahama has suffered because of not being a member of WTO. Because the minute you are able to be competitive with a country in terms of exporting a product, and you don't have WTO protection, that country immediately sets up barriers, okay? And that has happened to some of the companies in Grand Bahama, okay? So if you want to be serious about being an industrial capital, you've got to provide protection for those industries that come to Grand Bahama, that when they export around the world, their products would not be blackmailed by having import duties set up to prevent them from coming into countries.
Yeah. Earlier on in the program, Mr. James Smith talked about the liquidity in our system, in the banking industry. How do we free some of that up? And he talked about risk, credit risks. And Mr. Wilson, Sir Franklin, you might be the best person to lead us on this. There's a whole lot of money in the system, Sir Franklin.
But you see, there are several challenges. Again, what do you invest it in?
Right.
Today, I mean, who wants New Providence is where the population is. If we're going to tackle this problem, we have to talk about New Providence. If it's long run and you're visionarying and thinking, you could talk about Family Islands and whatever, but we got to think about New Providence.
You got to get innovative.
Okay. No, but my point is, I think we've agreed in response to a question I asked earlier, is there a case for building a new hotel on New Providence? Certainly not one of any size. It may be a little boutique hotel, a little small something or something, a luxury or something, but for employment, I don't see the case for building a significant hotel on New Providence. As a matter of fact, for us around this table, what we should all be concerned about in terms of risk, if we pick up the paper one day and Atlantis decides they're going to cut 10% of their salary too, it's something which could change this conversation very quickly.
Very much so.
Okay?
Very much so.
But, so my point is, there's no case for building a hotel. There's no case for building office buildings. I mean, what do you do? So my point is,
there's a case for building homes. There are a whole lot of young people
Yeah.
who want access
see-
to land,
see-
and they want some homes.
Yeah.
But the banks are making it very onerous for these young people.
No, that's not true.
That's
The
amount of money that
that's
they
talk.
want.
That's just talk.
No,
that is not
it's true.
That is not true.
25% down, 30%
What you just
down.
said about the banks is not true. I'm not here defending any bank.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that it is not correct to blame the banks
Right.
for being risk conscious. I wouldn't even say risk averse. No, this is the case, man.
We're not saying that the banks should be risk averse or risk or not protect the money.
No,
what
what you
we
are
are saying is that land sales are down in this country. And the reason why I believe that land sales are down is because young people in particular do not have access to loans in the banks because
and that's the bank's problem. That's the bank's fault.
The banks are asking for a high down payment. That's the point I
Mr.
made.
Jones, while the former governor,
But isn't that right?
No, he's right, Bendel. Mr. Francis is correct. He talked about, let us not encourage among Bahamians any sense of entitlement because I'm a victim. The fact of the matter is, the young Bahamians of whom you speak, if the banks say, 1% down, they ain't got it. So the fact that the bank say 25% is academic, they ain't got no savings. If you say 1%, Wendell, you know this is a field I happen to know something about. The fact of the matter is, the reality is the level of personal behavior in this country is what is the major constraint to the inability to meet the housing needs. It's not the banks. The fact of the matter is, if you, Arawak Homes came in with 5% down. The fact of the matter is, more than half the houses we built, lending many of the people a big
5%.
part of the 5%. Wendell, tonight, I'm glad, let's linger on this a minute. Because if there's one takeaway that a lot of people watching this program can take from this, Wendell, if you take, I take all the teachers in this country, if you give 50% of them a month to say, bring me $1,000, which is your own money, I'm not sure you'll get it. If you ask, go on the police force, you take all the police officers in this country, I give you a month to bring me $1,000 of your own money. I don't think he could find it. So what I'm saying to you is, Wendell, Mr. Francis is correct. Let us, I suggest, not encourage people to look for excuse with no bank for their own problems. The fact of the matter is, two things have happened, Wendell, in my honest view. When the level of consumer credit in this country in 1992 was like $200 million. It was like $200 million. Today it's 2.some billion dollars.
Right.
Wendell, that's the problem. And let's be very clear, that was a public policy decision. It was I'm not being partisan, but I went on a show you did. History will judge one of the most unfortunate decisions that was made with Perry Christie as Prime Minister was how he dealt with gambling. History will judge one of the most unfortunate decisions made when Hubert Ingham was Prime Minister is how he liberalized consumer credit, and with it, this thing about salary deductions. Each of them have something that they will have to answer to the historians on.
The salary reduction, I think, doesn't fall in that category. I'll tell you why. The larger issue here is how do you mitigate risk? Because the bunch of
Yes.
stakeholders,
Absolutely.
right? And how do you encourage savings or
Yes,
better behavior?
absolutely.
Were it not for the salary reduction, which mitigates the risk of the bank, if you say I'm going to deduct, I'm working for the government, you can take it from me, you become a borrower for them because they know they can get the money at the source. So it's a way of forcing him to take away that part of his income and making the first payment. So even though he may not wish to do it,
But
Mr.
Mr. Smith, let me tell you what the mistake was. The mistake was, by doing salary deductions, the consumer lenders sidelined the banks. Mr. Jones, please understand this. For years and years, the banks loaned money to people without salary deduction. And they did so on one premise. That premise was Bahamians valued their house so much, they were going to pay their home mortgage first.
Right.
To his credit, an individual who I give a lot of credit for saying to the public policy makers in the country something very serious was happening, was Anwar Sundaji from Royal Fidelity Bank. For years, he said, Bahamians' value systems were changing. And the consumer lenders figured it out. Give me your salary deduction, pay the bank out of what left.
Yeah.
All right.
They went for the spread. Remember now, they went for the spread.
No, that's my point.
You know,
My point to you is,
how much you consumer loan at the time, 11%, they paying you 4%.
Yeah.
I end
So
with
in
this
2
comment.
years,
I end with this comment, gentlemen.
Yes.
Look, man, what has happened with consumer credit, where we went from like $200 million in 1991 to $2.4, $2.5 billion today,
Yes.
is at the root of a lot of our problems.
But with the liquidity in our banks, the banks are awash with cash, Mr. Francis. The question is, how do you stimulate the economy?
Yes. Well, as I said at the beginning, and I think it's been said by a number of us, there's no quick fix to this. I think we've got to realize what we're facing, where we are, and we've got to. Now, I must say, obviously, if the economy is very weak as it is and not likely to strengthen in the short term significantly, we've got to have some kind of short-term fix. And one could maybe talk about what that could be. But I think that there does need to be a much more important, longer-term way of changing our economy, changing the way our people are thinking, changing the way they perceive what they need to do in order to be successful in life. At the moment, there is a feeling that you don't have to do very much. Let me tell you just one thing I wanted to say all evening. I think many of us have got exactly the same experience. Often I marvel at the fact that I have difficulty getting a small serviceman, a small business person, maybe a plumber or electrician, and you can find good ones. I'm not saying not. But more often than not, you have to go through half a dozen before you can find one who will come when he says he will come,
Amen.
who will do what he says he'll do, who is realistic about what he's charging, and so on. I mean, does this sound like an economy in trouble? No. And why? Because people don't understand. They think we can continue like we were 20 years ago without any consequence.
That's right.
People have got to get serious.
That's right.
Well, that is such a, and I'm sure we all
That's
can
the
agree
point.
on that. You know, I was telling my wife the other day, having money doesn't really help you in this economy.
That's right.
you can have all the money in the world, but you can't find a good.
An anecdote, I just remember something about the electrician or the plumber, right?
Right.
Who I called, he said he'll be there at 2 o'clock this particular day. That's the time, right? So he didn't, so I called at 3. What happened to you? Oh, I had to go in life with key. So I said, wait a minute, my money must be different. we agreed, right? And that pushes the price up as well, you know. Because if I'm paying him, say,
Right.
$20 an hour, and the guy paid him 30 or 40, he'll bypass me.
But you know that problem that Julian brought up. You know, let's not just limit it to the electrician and the gardener. You can say that throughout this economy in all the professions.
That's right.
You hear what I say?
Except accounting.
No. We got those problems now too. We
accounting?
didn't have them, but we now have it, right, Sir Franklin? I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's lawyers. We complain about having so many lawyers, right?
That's right.
But that doesn't result in work getting done faster.
That's right.
That's right. Absolutely.
We have so many accountants.
That's right.
It's a problem of
incredible.
discipline.
It goes back to what Julian said. You know, for some reason, Bahamians, have this general feeling that they really don't have to work hard and they don't have to be aggressive in getting after it. I mean, Sir Franklin will tell you, running a number of different businesses, his key motto to his staff member on an on-day, hourly basis, get it done. Let's do what we got to do to get it done. Empower them to get it done. To push them, to let them know to make it happen. Because it just doesn't happen in this country, and it's getting worse. I mean, I'm embarrassed when my clients call me and tell me, Ray, what happened to the audit report your staff member promised me? And people promise stuff, Julian.
That's right.
And they don't live up to their promises. That
Julian,
is
let me
getting
say to you,
worse and worse every day.
Mr. Jones, this panel tonight has triggered a very significant point. And you're a very influential voice in this country with your various programs. And I encourage you to take heart from this point, which the basic point is this. Let us not allow to continue among our population this sense that somehow they are victims. Everyone doing them something. They are not responsible for their own thing. We just came out of a general election. The politicians figured it out. No one was telling people about any self-responsibility. The campaign was, one party say, I can give you free education. Next man give you free electricity.
That's right. That's right.
What's this all about?
That's right. Absolutely.
But
You don't have to do anything. I can give it to you for free.
and I think that's the point.
I can change back. It's all
was-
I can give you something else.
we
So the point, sorry, I'm
That's
sorry
good,
about this,
yeah.
Gowan. But just to make this one point, okay? Mr. Jones, stay on this theme because the politicians are not doing it. Somewhere along the line, we will not get out of this malaise until self-reliance.
That's right. Absolutely.
Until self-reliance, hard work, thrift, until notions like this
That's right.
become a greater part of our way of life, we will not get out of this malaise.
And what I was going to add to that is when we talk about our value system, it is those that our forefathers and those in leadership positions have taught us that we follow. And those persons of the older days had a very keen interest in saving money and becoming owners of the economy, as opposed to simply enjoying, if you will, the frills of the economy.
Right.
But I think one of the key elements as well, and this is not, again, to badger the political directorate, but when you have a situation where your fiscal situation as a government since independence has never run fiscal surpluses overall, and you then look at the election euphoria in terms of the spending and in terms of how we behave. The government, I would say, is a microcosm of society, but unfortunately is a self-perpetuating cycle because the society then looks and says, well, the government ain't worrying about paying bills. So if the government ain't worrying about paying bills, why I have to worry about paying bills? Because I give my money to the government in some minor way, so if anything goes wrong, then I turn to the government. We have this, and I think the term that, and that's why I was jumping in with Sir Franklin, self-reliance. We're not victims. And let me tell you why we have the very clear distinction. When Bahamians leave the Bahamas, are they ever victims?
No.
They are the lions. They are the purveyors. They are the ones that go after the environment in which they are now participating. But then they come home and they say, I don't want this to be a jungle. I want this to be the caged environment where I don't have to do anything. Someone comes and gives me my bananas or my meat and it allows me to eat simply by the fact that I am what I say I am.
Yeah, but there are some very interesting points raised here, and we are talking values. And Franklin, speak to that lady in Grand Bahama, in Freeport, tonight, who is taking her children to sleep in a car.
Yes. Yes.
She lost her house because the economy in Grand Bahama is not working.
Exactly. Exactly.
You talk about thrift and
Right.
self-reliance. Speak to her.
Well, let me put it this way. Obviously, Grand Bahama's situation was not an overnight creation. I go back to the statistics. Consumer debt in this country was like $200 million in 1992. It's $2.4, $2.5 billion today. That has very serious consequences. It totally eroded, like I said, our value systems. to the point where paying my mortgage, it became more, the consumer lenders figured out.
Right.
Bahamians said, let me pay my
We
cable
live off
bill.
of consumer.
Let me pay my cable bill before I pay my mortgage. That totally undid our thing.
But fine, we understand that.
Okay.
We
Now,
understand
my
that.
point is, the fact of the matter for that woman in Grand Bahama tonight, okay? What are our choices, okay? The fact of the matter is, she could sit and hope and pray that the government somehow spend a lot of money they don't have to buy this hotel, and then find $20 to $25 million, I think is the figure I heard James quote, what the owners were losing. How much? They were subsidizing it, so they could hope and pray the government will spend this hundreds of, or whatever million of dollars it is to buy it, and then find 25, 30 million a year to subsidize it, and fool her into believe be willing to do it for a short time, and she may get a job. And the effect of that is it'll kick it down the field. She could hope for that. The rest of the country would have to think whether that's a good thing. But that's one of the things she could pray for. Okay? The other thing, Wendell, as tough as it is, the fact of the matter is, there's always a way. There's always a way. The fact of the matter is, however tough things are, there's always a way, man.
You tell her, find a way.
Find a way. And Wendell, it may sound tough, but begin with faith in something.
And just to add
Faith
to
in
it,
something.
add to what Sir Franklin is saying, my mother with 5 children without a husband had the same situation this lady had. Lost her job because of a fire. The place was destroyed. Within a week, she was selling lunch.
That's right.
She called all her friends, said, look here,
Yes.
things are tough.
Yes.
I need you to make a way for me to have some sandwich sold where you are. What school you are? Then she got another friend, and she didn't drive.
Yes.
Couldn't drive. To drop her around to these various places to drop off lunch.
Yes.
Absolutely.
See, it goes back to what Julian said earlier, If you've gotten into that mindset where you feel that you're a victim, you can't think like that.
You
Right?
got to be careful of generalizing specific areas, right? Because I was thinking that we actually, in fact, have provided over the years a social safety net. The problem is sometimes it doesn't really reach the people that need it. People working in, if you look at the budget, you might find a guy who is working is actually getting
Social.
social thing
Which is not a
that the
problem.
woman who isn't working
That's true.
has no access to. So we really need to also ensure that the taxpayers' money that is supposed to support the social safety net
Yeah.
goes to the people who you actually need it.
I mean,
Now, we have all kind of stories about what happens.
The other
there.
point, Mr.
I-
Jones, if
having
I
said-
could, just to make one point, okay? I mentioned this thing about the people. Mr. Francis triggered this conversation in self-reliance. In my humble opinion, the other part is we got to get off this bandwagon, listen to these politicians regardless of party.
I agree.
Politicians in our country over the last 25 years have turned us into tribes.
Yep.
They've turned us into tribes.
I agree with you, Sir
That's
Franklin.
what they've done. They've turned us into tribes. And rather than celebrate and encourage us to think about the things on which we agree,
Yes.
it's all been, I
Division.
better than you,
Yeah.
or I this or that, or whatever the case. I smarter than you,
Yeah.
I'm more honest than you, all this type of stuff. This is foolishness.
Yes.
So what we do? Every 5 years, we turn the government. Because you ain't no good, or you ain't keep your word. Look what we just did. We just came out of an election. What we did, one party says half of the country, half of the population, you go run the country while we in power. So we showed this crew, this other half, now you can run the country. The half that ran it for the last 5 years, you go on the side.
Yeah.
How does that make sense?
Doesn't.
To give you a very concrete example, okay? I mentioned on a show I did with you before, Jones, but this to me is a very telling point, and I'm not being personal. The country manager for the Royal Bank of Canada accepts an appointment to be the chairman of a national board. That could not happen without him talking to his senior management people. Can I take this role?
Right.
This wasn't nothing to do with no party.
Yes.
He was this. So if the Royal Bank of Canada says yes, you could accept that role.
Yeah.
Implicit in that was the Royal Bank of Canada was prepared to make resources of the institution available to him.
Correct.
So the government changes.
Yes.
And what happens? We fire him.
Yes.
I mean, how's that progress?
Yeah.
That's not making any comment on who replaced him.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about him as a person.
No.
This is the country manager for the Royal Bank of Canada.
Yeah.
How is that progress?
Frank, I fully agree with you. I think unless we can get over this political partisanship, honestly, we're not going to go anywhere.
Anyway,
This is just a dead-end street. And, you know, I actually, the way I say it is that we have given the politicians far too much influence in our lives and in this country. We've got to pull that back. We got to dial it back. But I don't want us to finish this program without mentioning a very important point which we've mentioned off air, and that is crime. Unless we can resolve this crime problem, and by that I mean return things to where they were 25 years, 30 years ago, when, you know, if you had 10 murders a year, that was real news. Unless we can get back there, I fear there's a song which says it'll be a long, hard struggle.
That's right.
And I think that's where we'll be.
That's right. And Mr. Francis, let me tell you 2 points about that. 2 weeks ago, I got a call on Ilusra, a very prominent businessman in Governor's Harbor is held up in his house. And there are people on Ilusra who just could not conceive that happening. Now, the family Allens remains the bastion of hope for us. Now, if this crime thing spreads to the family Allens, what are we doing? And I go back to Mr. Francis. I go back. 2 things, policy things that are made in the last 25 years. The policy changes that drove the increase in consumer credit from 200 million to 2-point-some billion, and gambling. Those things are related to so many social problems in our country, in my humble view, including crime.
As we conclude our program, I want you to focus on youth unemployment, and this is the last go around here. It's extremely high. We have tens of thousands of young people who are looking for opportunities in this country, and we need to focus on how we are going to find opportunities for these young people. I began the program by saying the economy is very narrow. How do we expand the economy to provide opportunities, whether they are employment opportunities or new business ventures for the youth of our country? We begin with Mr. Winder and we end with Mr. Wilson. Closing comments, all in that.
Well, you know, you talk about youth employment and youth entrepreneurship. You know, as chairman of Junior Achievement, I've been, I guess, chairman for a number of years. And for the last couple of years, I've told the manager and those who operate with Junior Achievement, we have to have a different measurement for success in Junior Achievement. That measurement must take into consideration how many persons that come through Junior Achievement actually become entrepreneurs in our country. We need to make a big shift in thinking so our young people can begin to understand that's where their focus and their thinking needs to be. For a number of years, we've used other measurement to determine success. But junior achievement, the real success of junior achievement has always been, but we got away from the mandate. And I've told them, look, unless we are doing that, we're not successful. We can have numbers, we can be having a lot of fun, but unless young people that come into the program don't go back and become entrepreneurs, we're not being successful.
Thank you, Mr. Winder. Mr. Francis?
Well, I go back to the theme of modernizing our economy. I think we've got to achieve that somehow. I would invite anybody who hasn't seen it yet to have a look at some pieces on YouTube regarding the new program for China over the next, I think, 15, 20 years. It'll blow your mind to see what they have already achieved and where they want to take that economy. And what you see there is, dreaming and imagination and courage and determination. This is not leaving things to chance at all. And I believe that we've got to figure out a way to put our best minds to work to figure out how we move this country as a whole, but certainly this economy forward. And I agree with Ray. I think that one of the solutions has got to be to unleash the sort of creative thirst of our young people, because I believe it's there. I mean, I listen and I hear, some of our young people are writing books and all this sort of thing. But, when you look at it, I mean, we could talk about this for a long time. I know I got to keep it short at this point, and I will. But there's one point. There's far too much bureaucracy around here. We've got to go through far too many hoops to get anything done. We've got bureaucrats who make a living out of making our lives more complicated. And that's only one example of, I think, the way that one can change this whole culture so that young people feel now able to get things done, to do things, to explore, to use their talents and so on. But I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I think that this is a huge, given where we have slipped and how far back we really are now, it's going to be a huge effort but it can be done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Francis. Mr. Smith?
With the young people, I believe in practical programs, recognizing what needs to happen, like creating jobs. Your organization is looking at creating the entrepreneur. I would marry that with providing the technical skills to permit that entrepreneur, that leader, to say, get together with a group of guys that you think can do certain jobs. Then I'll tie it into the comment Julian made about trying to get an electrician or a plumber and that sort of thing. We already have BTVI, where you expand it and you say we give you the basic skills. You put yourself together with a group of guys who will learn basic repair and maintenance, this sort of thing. Then we do use the technology, a platform where the demand is. We can go online and say, look, I need to have this repair, this repair, this repair, this repair. Some central unit where you actually send them out. You're meeting the supply with the demand. Because we all have, anybody who lives in a house knows that every week or something's going on, you need it. So the demand is there, all right? Mm-hmm. So we kind of organize it, give them the basic skills. So you don't really need a three-phase, guy to come in and maybe change a couple of wires and that sort of thing. Right. But the point is we have to take them seriously, like skills, you can transfer them very quickly at BTVI, basic skills. They are your guys who have some leadership ability. They form into little groups, companies, that sort of thing, so they get the opportunity to lead a team, but it has to be coordinated from, from some area. But we just have to engage them, I think, more practically on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Mr. Bowe?
I think I go back to where I started, and this is the optimism. We have done it before. When you look at the Bahamian economy, look at the insurance industry that was all foreign owned in the 70s, and look at all of the major insurance company and players are now Bahamian owned. You look at all of the banks that are in the country, the commercial banks. Toronto Dominion is no longer there. Bank of Montreal is no longer there. They have now been replaced by Bahamian names. I won't call them, just say we've done it before. When we pool resources, we have organizations where young men, either so naive or so brave, you could choose which one, pooled resources and decided to form an investment group that has expanded from that small unit into conglomerates in our country that we have today. So to the young person, my comment is, we have done this before. It has been done by sacrifice, it has been done by putting your shoulder to the wheel, but more importantly, it has been done by training yourself to take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves. As James just said, which is critical, that we need to encourage our youth to say, the group is stronger than the single. And whether it is pooling together so that there's a small service provider firm that can do handiwork and other things, or it is that same group that is saying, I am putting together $1,000, I'll use Sir Franklin's number, over this month. I will sacrifice the frivolousness in terms of my attire, my sneakers, my cell phone, and all of the others. I'm putting it together, and I find 10 of my like-minded friends. And we've now just created $10,000. And we are going to look at how we take that and deploy that. Because the group and the pooling, capital markets in this country is the only element that is going to allow us to take that liquidity. And I'll end by saying this only on the banknote. We always look at the banks as if the banks are the ones control the money. The bank's money is the depositor's money. We are the depositors. If we choose to take that money and deploy it into economic and investment activity, then why are we even speaking about the banks? It has to be us who make the decision.
Thank you, Mr. Bowe. Sir Franklin, you have the last word.
I noticed the focus on youth unemployment, and I think that's politically driven. I'm a big supporter of young people, et cetera, et cetera. But in our country today, as significant as youth unemployment is, think of that person who's today in their 50s, early 60s, had become very accustomed to a certain standard of living because they had a very comfortable job in an offshore bank, and that job is gone. And the prospect of getting the salary that they have become accustomed to is gone. It's gone.
Yes.
And they're still in their 50s
Yes.
or early 60s. That problem, it runs very deep. I'm told by friends, they were amazed during the course of this last election campaign how many teachers and police officers and so on and so forth have basically gone back home to their original home for a place to live.
Yes.
So as significant as youth unemployment is, there are people who are past the age of youth, but still, by God willing, the 3-score-and-10 thing has got a lot of years in front of them. Today, they are facing a very bleak time. And my comment is this, man. I say to the Bahamian people, push our politicians to make us less of a tribe. Pick politicians, judge them on the basis of what steps are they taking to unite us, not divide us. Because the truth is, in terms of public policy, we agree on so much.
Yeah.
We agree on so much. Don't let the politicians divide us and keep us divided on this yellow and red tribes. Secondly, let us believe in ourselves. Let us renew our faith in God. Let us renew our faith in ourselves. Let us cooperate. That is the answer.
Thank you so very much, Sir Franklin. Appreciate your being here. Mr. Bowe, Mr. Smith, Mr. Francis, Mr. Winder, thank you so very much. I believe our audience would have enjoyed this roundtable this forum here on the economy of the Bahamas, and we hope that many of our young people have been taking notes on some of the powerful things said here on this economic forum. And we thank these gentlemen for taking the time from their busy schedules to be with us this evening. Thank you very much for watching and listening to our program. Good evening, everyone.